This is a special report from ABC News Digital.
I'm Dan Kleffler in New York with this ABC News Digital special report. For the first time since Edward Snowden began leaking information about the NSA's massive secret spy program, a federal court has called the government's actions unconstitutional. But the debate is far from over, and the court battle, it's only just begun. So with more, I want to go outside of the White House where ABC's Mary Bruce is standing by in Washington. Mary?
Hi, Dan. That's right. A federal judge is now questioning the legality of these massive NSA programs to gather data on almost all of Americans' phone records and emails, setting up a much broader face-off over spying in America. It's a big blow to the Obama administration's massive and controversial collection of Americans' phone records. A federal judge saying the National Security Agency's database of virtually all phone calls in the U.S. may be unconstitutional. U.S. District Judge Richard Leon, a George W. Bush appointee, said the program almost certainly does violate a reasonable expectation of privacy and is indeed an unreasonable search under the Fourth Amendment. The almost Orwellian technology used by the NSA, Judge Leon said, enables the government to store and analyze the phone metadata of every telephone user in the United States. The ruling, which has been hailed by liberals as well as some conservatives, sets up a high-stakes battle over security and spying in America that's expected to be decided by the Supreme Court.
A federal judge is finally pushing back, is finally saying to the NSA, no, in fact, mass collection of phone records without individualized suspicion is not legal.
It's a victory for infamous NSA leaker Edward Snowden, who revealed this summer just how much phone data the NSA is gathering. The president has said this program and another that tracks emails are key to the fight against terror.
We've saved lives. We know of at least 50 threats that have been averted because of this information.
But Judge Leon refuted that argument, saying there is no evidence the program has thwarted a terrorist attack. For now, the program continues pending the government's almost certain appeal. The Justice Department has said it's reviewing the court's decision. Dan?
Oh, so Mary, let me ask you about that then. How quickly does that appeal have to be formed? What's the federal government been given for a timeline?
So despite the judge's dramatic language, there now is about a 6-month period in which the federal government can appeal, and we certainly expect that will happen. So now that the ball is rolling, expect the government to go ahead and take some action.
So what is the White House doing then? Is there any kind of a change in stance or position on this, of being behind the NSA?
The White House has not commented directly yet on this ruling, saying only that the Justice Department is reviewing the court's decision. But as you heard from the president's own mouth there, the White House really backs these programs. The president has said that there is, of course, a balance here that needs to be struck between the need to protect Americans' privacy, but also the need to protect Americans' security. So while they're willing to look into these programs to maybe make some tweaks to them, they do support the NSA's overall mission here.
Certainly something everyone's going to be watching for. ABC's Mary Bruce outside the White House. Mary, thank you for that. For more on what this means for the tech companies so intricately involved in these spy tactics, I want to bring in Greg Ferenstein, writer for TechCrunch. Greg, thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So these tech leaders are gathering at the White House today, in fact, and they obviously will be talking about the spy programs with the president. Mm-hmm. Where do companies like Google, Facebook, where do they stand in this fight?
So they've gotten increasingly aggressive against the NSA over the last few months. They've called for the end of bulk collection, that is kind of the en masse spying of internet behavior and telephone call records. They've also called for the ability to disclose the number of users that are queried by the National Security Agency.
Interesting. There's some very strong words, obviously, from the judge yesterday in the ruling, writing, in fact, as we heard from Mary's piece there, quote, almost Orwellian technology that enables the government to store and analyze phone metadata of every telephone user in the United States is unlike anything that could have been conceived in 1979. Why is 79 significant?
Well, because it was a court case that the U.S. government now uses to legally justify all the activities that it's doing. And he's saying that technology has evolved that allows the government to maintain and search more information than they ever could have imagined back then. So the law needs to be updated.
So, I mean, obviously that statement coming from the judge yesterday, but this case still has a long way to go. So what are some of the more significant hurdles then that it has to clear before a potential argument is made in the Supreme Court if it gets there?
Oh yeah, I mean there was a lot of celebration yesterday, but it was the court case is mostly symbolic because the injunction that is trying to stop the NSA from collecting this data is stayed until the appeals court, a higher court, makes its ruling, and likely one of the many cases from the bazillion civil libertarian organizations that are taking suit with the NSA, eventually they're going to have to go to the Supreme Court. So it's all going to wait for probably the highest court of the land. And that may take so long that Congress or the president himself could reform the program before.
Greg, I wanted to ask you then about this, that the president, in fact, was tasking a panel of senior government intelligence officers from past and present to review the programs, possibly recommended some changes. Do we know if that group is going to be able to deliver that report?
So the Wall Street Journal said that the task group has delivered the report. The most significant change that they're reportedly calling for is to make a civilian in charge of the NSA. Now, whether they will call for the end of the controversial part of the program, the bulk collection, we don't know. There's a lot of speculation, but again, we just don't know.
Now, what about the possibility, in fact, that this could be settled outside of a courtroom, in fact, altogether? Perhaps, the president perhaps accepting these certain reforms?
There's a pretty good chance. Right now, there's increasing support in Congress. There's a number of groups, both in the Senate and Congress, that have proposed similar bills, most of which call for the end of bulk collection. The only famous one that I'm aware of that doesn't call for the end of bulk collection is the one from Dianne Feinstein. So there's pretty strong support to end it.
So, you know, we see how Google, Facebook, and how the tech companies are dealing with this, but what about the telecom companies, Verizon, AT&T? How are they reacting to this ruling?
They have been much, much more muted. No one completely knows why. You can speculate. Maybe it's because they're getting a certain amount of money to search the records. Maybe because they don't care as much. Maybe because they have a closer relationship with the national security apparatus. Whatever the reason people can come up with, they are not fighting it like the tech companies are.
If, in fact, these NSA actions are eventually ruled to be unconstitutional, as the case would completely fall out, could these companies then face lawsuits from private citizens?
You know, that's a lot more complicated because generally the government has granted immunity for these types of activities. Back during the Bush era, when it was found out that AT&T was collecting a lot of data in like a secret closet warehouse in San Francisco's Soma district, AT&T was eventually not held liable for that. So I think if you look at historical precedent, probably not, because it was granted with the government's permission, and up until now, it's been entirely legal.
The man that is obviously associated with this, Edward Snowden, had a reaction to the ruling, asking Brazil, in fact, for political asylum so he can continue to fight NSA activities. And this is what he wrote: "The tide has turned, and we can finally see a future where we can enjoy security without sacrificing our privacy. Our rights cannot be limited by a secret organization, and American officials should never decide the freedoms of Brazilian citizens." Is there any indication that the Brazilians will accept that offer for asylum?
We don't know. I mean, diplomatically, it's a very hairy move. I mean, look, I lived in Brazil for 3 months. I can't blame him for wanting to move there, especially from Russia. But I mean, Russia has a much more tenuous relationship with the United States, and they can do this as a symbolic move against the United States. Brazil wants to have a much friendlier relationship. It's a pretty bold move to take an enemy of the United States and house him while he investigates secretly government programs.
It is a diplomatic tango, I suppose. Greg Ferenstein from TechCrunch. Greg, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate that. Of course, we have a complete recap right here on abcnews.com. For now, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York with this ABC News Digital Special Report.